Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and it's Monday, July 18th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open. I did pop the link in there to what we're talking about here from Robert Burney's webpage, is Joy to Me and You. And we've been looking at this for months now, a couple months, different stuff on his website, and he's got some great information there. That's www.joy, J-O-Y, MEU.com. And if you go to his site index, you can see all the different things that he's talking about. Robert Burney is a codependence therapist, a grief counselor. He's a spiritual teacher. He's an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls. And so he's got lots of great information there. I hope everybody will check it out. And I found a lot of it to be very much useful and helpful for me. So I'm working on inner child stuff, really, is what I'm doing. And, you know, I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio. And I just wanted to be one more voice speaking out against abuse. You know, child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And I also wanted to, you know, just be another voice for survivors, you know. So, you know, there's so many people that can't speak out for many reasons. So many people who are, you know, are still hurting and suffering, so, you know, due to the abuse that they suffered as children. I know that's me. And, you know, so many places, you know, there's people out here talking about this stuff, you know, and I'm just one more voice. I just want to be one more voice out here, so that just to add to the people out here who are talking about this stuff, because it is so important that we do talk about it. This is not something, you know, this is stuff that, you know, society and has been pushing under the carpet. Families and society have been pushing this stuff under the carpet forever, and it needs to be out forefront and center, because this is an epidemic. This is a plague in our society, and unless we're willing to start talking about it, it's not going to change, you know. And as far as my own healing journey goes, you know, I'm quite a ways through there. 4 years ago, I started my healing journey, and, you know, I had already done a lot of work to, you know, prior to doing these shows and prior to coming onto Blog Talk Radio. But I realized that there were still areas in my life that I really needed to work through, and I was not making, you know, any real progress. And as I started doing these shows, I realized that it was helping me to talk about this stuff and get it out. So, you know, you have to listen to at your own discretion to all of my shows. Like, my shows are very sensitive and, you know, I don't sugarcoat it. I just tell it like it is. Abuse is horrible, and it's ugly, and it's heinous, and it's not pretty. And so I'm not minimizing it, and I'm not, you know, trying to make it look pretty by saying pretty words about it. Like, abuse hurts, and it's ugly, and it's horrible, and it's torturous, and it's absolutely not pretty, right? So, you know, when you listen to my shows, you have to listen at your own discretion, and you have to you know, seriously know what's good for you to listen to. Like, if you feel the topics of abuse may bother you, or you're a survivor who's just starting out on your healing journey, you have to be careful listening to my stuff, because it can trigger you, right? And so if you think the material might bother you, the show material might bother you on any of my shows, which is all about abuse, then you need to not listen to my shows, right? And young people who are under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because I believe that children should be protected at all times. And so if you're under the age of 18, you have an adult, somebody who's older, who's an adult, who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening to this show or not, to any of my shows, right? So thanks a lot. We'll get right into this. And we're looking at the grieving. Robert Burney's written some web pages here on grieving, and this next portion is grieving, examples of how the process works. And he goes through and he gives some examples and stuff, and I haven't read through all the way. I just sort of took a little look at it. And, you know, it's quite interesting what he's got to say here about grief, doing the grief work. And I'd already looked at some of that from the ASCAsupport.org Survivor to Thriver workbook. So I haven't, you know, I've grieved my whole life, but I don't know if I've actually grieved what I need to grieve, which is the loss of my childhood, which is kind of what I'm doing right now, I guess, you know, with this issue of the CSA and incest that I suffered as a child. You know, I'm looking into that right now as I'm writing a book, a sequel to my book, A Life of Death and Redemption. And so, you know, to have to go back and remember that stuff, you know, of course, right now I'm sort of in a state of anger and more just being hurt than anything, as far as my healing journey goes. But I need to grieve it, and I need to allow myself to go through all the process and all the steps in order to feel better about the whole thing. And grieving is just one more step, right? And so that's what we're looking at here on Robert Burney's webpage, is Joy to Me and You. And so the link there is in the chat room. It's www.joy, the number 2, meu.com/grieving.html. And he starts out talking about Robert Burney. He says, life events such as the September 11th terrorist attack on New York City and Washington, D.C. are very traumatic. It is important to own our feelings about life events. Rather, it is a horrific event, such as the terrorist attack, or if it is some other kind of traumatic loss, such as a relationship breakup or loss of a job or whatever. And he says what makes owning our feelings about traumatic events is in the present so difficult is that we have unresolved grief from the past. So he says the reality of the dynamics of emotional energy is that the more we try to control and deny it based upon an intellectual paradigm that is reversed to love, the more likely it is to manifest at the worst times and in the most destructive manner. So I guess the more we try to control and deny our real feelings, our emotions, on things, I guess the more problems we have, you know what I mean? And I guess that's true, because we're not allowing ourselves to actually feel anything. And growing up as a child, in my home, like, we were not allowed to express how we were feeling. Like, my mother would, just talking about myself here, all of my siblings were abused. My parents were brought up on charges, and they were abusing us all. I mean, I'm the last of 7 children born, and my sister, who's 18 years older than me, was she was the oldest, and I was all the siblings in between. And I heard from all my older siblings, not even talking at the same place, talking about the abuse that went on in the home before I was born. Their stories were corroborated. Like, I mean, I would hear from my oldest sister, and she would talk about it, and then, like a year later or whatever, I'd be talking to one of my brothers, and then they would say what was going on, and it was accurate, you know what I mean? And so I got a lot of information about how they were treated, and the fact my parents were brought up on charges when I was just a little kid. And I remember the social workers coming around, and I remember for a short time there things seemed to be okay while the social workers were coming around, and then after they left, it just went really bad really fast. So we were not allowed to express any of the feelings that we were having about my parents fighting and their domestic violence and domestic abuse, and my brothers getting hurt. If my dad had beat up one of my brothers and I was crying about it, I'd be beaten up, because I was showing emotions towards what was going on in the home, right? This is how we grew up, so we were not allowed to show any emotions, and so basically all that stuff gets stuffed down in there, and then have a lot of difficulty later on dealing with those emotions because they turn very destructive. After a while, they can. I know mine was a lot of internalized anger and rage because of that, right? So emotions, he says, are a vital part of our being, and to suppress emotions is dysfunctional. It does not work. Anytime we're trying to maintain emotional control out of our damaged ego programming that is based upon separation, shame about being human, and fear, we are doing damage to our being. So Robert Burney says, with any closed system, whether it be an engine of your car or your own being, neglecting and denying the importance of one aspect of the internal dynamic will cause damage. Kind of like what will happen when you run your car without oil. The system will break down. So he says depression and anxiety disorders, environmental illness and post-traumatic stress disorder, self-mutilation and obesity, cancer and Alzheimer's disease are some of the effects of our dysfunctional attempts to control emotions. This is just what he says here. And he says it is possible to have some control over emotions that is functional, that does work in terms of the health of our being. That control does not entail suppressing and denying the emotions, damning the energy. It involves honoring and respecting the emotional component of our being. So by changing our relationship, he says, with our own emotions, through changing the attitudes, definitions, and beliefs, the intellectual paradigm that we are allowing to define our life experience, to one that is aligned with love and oneness rather than separation and fear, we can start to achieve some emotional honesty and balance. And I totally agree with that. Like, I've found like this last, even really especially this last couple of years, since I've started really looking into, how I felt about being abused and how I felt about what happened in my family, especially writing the book A Life of Death, The Redemption, and Levita Juvies, I started to really look at what it really did to me and what it did and how I felt about it, you know what I mean? because I needed to be able to work through some of this stuff because of the rage and the anger and stuff had pretty well, I don't know, like I had dealt with a lot of it. I still have some, but I had dealt with the most dangerous part of it, which was to, just to allow myself to feel differently about myself, and it's been a process. It didn't happen overnight. Like I didn't just one day say, oh, that's it, I feel great. It's taken me 4 years to get where I'm at here today, right? So this is the thing. But I totally agree with what he says there, this emotional honesty and balance, right? I mean, if I need to cry about something, I need to cry about it. You know what I mean? Like if I need to be sad about something, I need to be okay with being sad about it, because otherwise I'm not going to allow myself to experience what I need to feel. And there's reasons why I need to feel it. So that's the whole issue of people that are just stuffing emotions and not allowing themselves to feel it. I know some people, for a long time I felt emotions just too deeply. And so, the pain and the anger and the rage and just this horrible, hatred for what happened to me as a child, was just eating me up. And so, feeling the feelings, you got to be careful doing that work, right? Very careful. If you're a survivor and you're listening to this, I don't suggest anybody do anything self-help. I'm doing all my stuff self-help, but that's because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm not going to hurt somebody else. You have to be careful doing this work because it's looking into the part of us that we haven't really wanted to deal with or see for a long, long time, and feeling these feelings and feeling these emotions and stuff from so long ago. Have to be very careful what we're doing. That's why I was talking on Friday. I was talking about that. The ASCA Support Survivor to Thriver workbook is, I thought it was great. I haven't done all the work in it, which I want to go back and do. But I've read through it, and I did the whole series of shows on it, just talking about it and looking at it for myself and for other people, whoever wanted to tune in. And the first 35 pages are safety first. That's how serious this stuff is. Like, we have to make sure that we are safe enough to do this kind of work on our own, grief work, or, feeling the feelings, allowing ourselves to really get in touch with those feelings and stuff like that, because, it can send people for a real nosedive, survivors of abuse, and, people can end up going backwards in their healing journey instead of going forward. So that's why that Survivor to Thriver's workbook is awesome. And that's from ASCA Support, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, ASCAsupport.org. And you go on their website and they have this, it's a free download, or you can just read it from the website. It's called the Survivor to Thriver Workbook. And the first 35 pages, like I said, is dealing with safety first. Can you actually do this work on your own? Because otherwise, then you don't want to attempt it if you're not 100% sure, that you're not going to hurt yourself or go backward in your healing journey or hurt somebody else because of dealing with this stuff. So be very, very careful when you're doing this work, right? So he says, grieving, examples of how the process works. And Robert Burney continues on here, and he says, this grieving is not an intellectual process. Changing all our false and dysfunctional attitudes is vital to the process. Enlarging our intellectual perspective is absolutely necessary to the process. But doing these things does not release the energy. It does not heal the wounds. So he says, learning what healthy behavior is will allow us to be healthier in the relationships that do not mean much to us. Intellectually knowing spiritual truth will allow us to be more loving some of the time. But in the relationships that mean the most to us, with the people we care the most about, when our buttons are pushed, we will watch ourselves saying things we don't want to say and reacting in ways that we don't want to react, because we are powerless to change the behavior patterns without dealing with the emotional wounds. And that's very true. Like, that happened to me yesterday, actually. Just laughing because I had a horrible day yesterday because I was so grumpy about my sweetheart was kind of driving me crazy. My sweetheart, really my husband for 16 years, was really pushing my buttons yesterday. And because I was abused as a child, he was teasing me all day. Teasing, but not a funny teasing, but he thought it was funny. It's one of those type of teasings where it's actually malicious, but the person will say, "I was just kidding. I'm just kidding." Right? So by the afternoon, I was actually cursing to myself. I wasn't cursing at him. I don't really want to, I don't abuse people. I just don't believe in abusing people. So of course I'm just getting madder and madder, and I'm like, oh man. So I told him off, and I said, look, you're now pushing my buttons, and you're saying things that are hurtful to me. And he says, I'm just joking. And all of this stuff, like really, I mean, this really stems from the abuse that I suffered as a child. Absolutely it does, because most people would know. I would be able to look at him and say, he loves me. He's just kidding around. He just loves me. My sweetheart loves to joke around with me. We have a funny relationship, and we like to laugh, and we like to have a good time, and we're not very serious people. I mean, as far as our relationship goes, like we don't sit around and we're not. I guess everybody's different, right? And we just have fun together. And so he was just having fun, but I wasn't having fun because in my mind I'm thinking, oh my God, you're more garbage I'm going to have to deal with. And so it is hard, and that comes from those old wounds, and it comes from being hurt as a child, and so I'm still trying to learn how to handle these things without losing my peace and losing my going backwards in my healing journey because of something like that, because I think that there's other ways to handle that instead of getting so down and so pissed off and starting to almost I don't know, like Robert Brady says, say things that you don't want to say, which is what I was doing under my breath. I didn't want to say them to him because I don't want to hurt him, but then again, what he was doing was hurting me. So I literally had to tell him, what you're saying, even though you're joking, is hurting me. So he had to come out and he had to apologize, right? So, but again, he knows I was abused as a child, but he doesn't sometimes stop to think about some of the stuff that he does, that it may affect me because of that, right? And so I try not to be so sensitive, you know what I mean? But I am definitely oversensitive, on what people say to me and how I take it. And that's because I was so incredibly damaged and wounded as a child, right? And it's harsh. It's so harsh to even just get along with in these relationships, you know what I mean? And how to deal with it. I can never my sweetheart will never understand what I really went through, even though he knows about the abuse, and he will never ever be able to understand what went on in my mind, what went on in my heart, and how it really affected me, And so he's never going to really fully understand the seriousness of when he's going too far, you know what I mean? Because he thinks it's just fun and games. Most other people would have probably been able to blow that off and be laughing because they would have thought, oh, that's funny. But me, I'm just like, all of a sudden this well of emotion starts rising up within me, and I'm like, just the same old garbage, the same old, you're pushing me, and basically when people push me, I shut them out of my life. I'll just throw them out of my life. I told him, I said, my dad was doing that to me. I said, and he was out of here. He was gone. I said, and you will be too. You know what I mean? And that's sad because me and my sweetheart have been together 16 years, and all my sweetheart was doing was joking with me. But that's how serious I take that stuff. And that's the damage done, right? That's the stuff that, I can sit around and say, okay, I'm emotionally well, and I'm healing because, I'm doing all the healing work. And then, when the buttons are pushed, I find out just where I'm at in my healing journey, in the reality of it. You know what I mean? So I can fool myself all I want and say, oh, I'm doing emotionally, I'm great, I'm just feeling great, I'm so in control and, of my emotions and everything's wonderful. But I know the truth of that, and that's not true at all. I still have a lot of difficulty dealing with things, and that's why I know I still have work to do, you know what I mean? But I think, everybody probably has some work to do of some sort, right? So we're not alone in this, you know what I mean? He says, we cannot integrate spiritual truth or intellectual knowledge of healthy behavior into our experience of life in a substantial way without honoring and respecting the emotions. So Robert Birdie says we cannot consistently incorporate healthy behavior into day-to-day life without being emotionally honest with ourselves. And he says we cannot get rid of our shame and overcome our fear of emotional intimacy without going through the feelings. So that's kind of interesting for sure. All these are quotes from his Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. So he talks about this next portion. He says, grieving is a natural part of the human healing process. So he says, in Chapter 1 of the online book, which I am publishing, Attack on America, A Spiritual Healing Perspective, and there's a link at the bottom of the page for that, he says here. I haven't read it yet. He says, I urged people to wail and scream and sob to release the energy that was being generated by this traumatic event. Trauma is a shock to the system. Any type of trauma suffered by a human being, trauma to our physical bodies, witnessing a traumatic event, experiencing a loss, death of a loved one, house burning down, end of a relationship, etc. causes emotional energy to be generated in reaction to that trauma. So denying and suppressing that energy does not make it go away. So he says, well, isn't that the truth? Right? We can deny this stuff all we want, but it's not going away. It's not going anywhere. We can suppress it all we want, but it's not going away. This is this is why Robert Burney was saying on his web pages that he feels that society is, the whole of society is sick. Because we all, society denies everything. Denies the fact that child abuse even exists. Oh, really? Did it really happen? Does it really exist? Even though kids are ending up in the morgue every day. And if they're not in the morgue, they're in the children's hospitals, right? Just look around. They're everywhere. Children's hospitals, morgues, or some of them are just laying in their bedrooms, half dead, right? Like myself, and I used to be, because we never got any help. But the thing is it's horrific that society wants to deny the fact that this stuff exists, because it's easier. Nobody wants to really look at the truth of the heinous nature of child abuse and what it does. And nobody wants to see these little children. People always trying to tear down child abuse photos and, trying to get them removed from the internet. And the issue is that for people like myself, basically what that says to me is I don't exist. I was that ugly little beaten child laying there on the floor in a pool of my own blood, right? And if people don't want to see that, then what they're telling me is that I'm not worth even looking at. I don't exist. This is the truth and the reality of what child abuse is. You know what I mean? And whether it's physical abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, child sexual abuse, neglect, right? Like, this is the reality. It's heinous. It's ugly. And I think that society doesn't want to see it because it shows them just how evil people can be. And it's so ugly and it shows people that each and every one of us has a potential to be that way. How could we as human beings, as a society, hurt children like that? And yet it happens every day. And that's why nobody wants to see these abused kids. Nobody cares about these abused kids, and nobody, cares about child abuse, really. Well, a handful of people, obviously, thank God. But there's a whole lot of people that like to deny it and suppress it. Oh no, it doesn't exist. If we don't see it, it doesn't exist. We don't see those child abuse photos, it doesn't exist. Isn't life great? Meanwhile, kids are suffering. So I don't tell my story, doesn't matter. Meanwhile, you've got one person here who was completely damaged and completely twisted because of child abuse. So it's absolutely horrific that society wants to do that, but that's the way it is. So we do it. On every level, we're emotionally not well, right? It says, feel your feelings and release them, he says. Give yourself permission to let it all out. Wail and scream and sob. Try not to let the messages of an emotionally dysfunctional society or the discomfort of emotionally repressed people around you keep you from owning the grief to the fullest. He says they want you to pull it together and get yourself under control so they will be comfortable. He says, let it out. Release it. Do not shame yourself for it or apologize. It is marvelously healing to grieve. And owning our grief is part of being true to self. So he says, in an emotionally honest society, Dan Rather would have been crying and sobbing on his own program, serving as a role model for others, instead of keeping up appearances and stuffing his grief until some of it leaked out on the David Letterman show, Attack on America, Spiritual Healing Perspective, Chapter 1. Well, isn't that just the truth, I see this all the time because of the work that we're doing, and you have people saying, oh, you should be able to get over it. I was talking about this on one of my shows not too long ago. People saying, oh, can't you just get over it already? My God, move on with your life. My abuser dad, who's 88 years old, called me at Christmas time telling me, you need to get over it. You just need to get over it and move on. I'm like, my abuser dad phones me to tell me that I need to get over it and that, I need to move on and forgive and forget. I'm like, okay, abuser dad, you can go away now, It's really sick and perverse and twisted that people want people to shut off what they need to feel and what they need to go through. And, it just shows how really messed up our society really is. And, we have the right to own our feelings. And we don't have the right to hurt people. That's not right. And we really shouldn't be hurting ourselves. You know what I mean? That's what I was doing, hurting myself, mostly self-sabotage and stuff. But the thing is that didn't make it right. But I do have the right to cry about being abused as a child. I have the right to be angry about that, and I have every right to be sad and down because of what happened to me as a child. I have every right, I have every right to be upset about what happened to my mother, and what happened to my whole family because of the abuse in our home. And for me to sit there and suppress it is exactly, what I was doing my whole life, and it wasn't getting me anywhere. Just to keep those feelings just so far down there, not allowing myself to experience them, and that was part of the reason why I could not heal. Right, but once I started to actually look at this stuff and allow myself to feel it, and allow myself to say, okay, the shame doesn't belong to me. This shame, this was never mine in the first place. I didn't, deserve that. Like this shame, this was put on me by people who hurt me, and so I have to be able to feel what I need to feel, and be okay with it. Be okay with the fact that yes, I was wounded. And I have a right to cry and be angry and get upset and tell the truth if I want to tell my story, which is what I did. But the thing is he's so right. A lot of people like to keep that stuff. It makes people uncomfortable, especially people who are really not able to handle grief. Right? People who are not able to handle people crying will quite often say, don't cry, pull yourself together, it'll be okay. Because it makes them uncomfortable. Because they're not okay with people crying. Because maybe they don't even know how to grieve properly themselves. Maybe it makes them uncomfortable, so that's why they do that. So I usually just ignore people that say stuff like that. And he says, a little further down, he says, please feel your feelings. He says, let those sobs out. We are supposed to feel. It is healthy to grieve and breathe right into those feelings, he says. Sobs are little balls of emotional energy being released. And if you breathe into the feelings, it breaks up the grief, and the little energy balls of emotions can rise up and be released from your being. So that is good. So keep taking deep breaths. So he says, get into a rhythm, inhale, and he's kind of going through and telling us how to do this, right? Sob, 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 cry, cry, cry. As you exhale, inhale, sob, 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 cry, cry, cry. That is good. I mean, I've done plenty of that in my lifetime. I've done lots and lots and lots and lots. I mean, I used to spend sometimes 3 weeks doing that, grieving and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and for many serious reasons, and I always thought, man, I don't know if I'll be able to come back out of this. You know what I mean? It almost felt like a depression. Be very, very careful when you're doing that work. You know what I mean? I eventually pulled myself through it, and it was okay. But the thing is, we do have to be careful. It's a good idea to have somebody know, that you trust. You got to make sure you can trust them. You can't trust everybody. Obviously, I couldn't trust my parents. I mean, look what the hell they did to me. And you can't trust everybody, right? You have to be very careful who you let in your life and who you tell who you let in to help you with this stuff, But I mean, if you find somebody who's really there for you, you could, and they show it because they're there for you through the bad days, they're there with you through the good days, and they're just there, and they care, right? And they prove it. It's nice to have somebody in your life to help you do this work. You know what I mean? Because they can check on you. They make sure how you're, see how you're doing, and to make sure that you're not just spiraling downward in your healing journey. And they can be sort of help you to see what what you're doing. You know what I mean? Be very, very careful when you do this stuff, right? It's not, I'm talking from somebody who's coming from severe child abuse. You know what I mean? Severe anger and severe pain, internal pain. And, it's a scary place, you know what I mean? You have to be very careful when you're doing that work, and you have to be careful that you aren't going to hurt yourself or somebody else, right? Or just sit there and spiral down, you know what I mean? You don't want to do that. And we'll finish this up, for tomorrow. We'll take a look at the rest of this. We're not even a quarter of the way through the article. You can take a look there, www.joy2meu, and that's joy, the number 2, meu.com, and that's Robert Burney's webpage is there. So thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll be back on tonight on my show, as well as on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I hope you will check that out. We have Julie Federico there. She is the author of a book called Some Parts Are Not for Sharing, and she's out of Denver, Colorado, and she's a child abuse prevention advocate, and she's an author, and I hope you will join us. That's www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, and if you're on Blog Talk, you can just type in Dreamcatchers, So I'll be hosting that show tonight, and with Julie Federico. That's just going to be awesome, so I hope you will tune in, and I'll also be on my show after that, so probably talking about child sexual abuse and incest, right? This is what I'm focused on right now. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a good day. If you can't cope, you make sure that you do the right thing. You phone a crisis line. If you don't have anybody around because people are busy and they're working or whatever, and you can't get a hold of your therapist or your counselor, you phone a crisis line, man. That's what you do. You do not allow yourself to spiral down, and you make sure you phone a crisis line and you get some help, man. You know what I mean? You just have somebody to talk to anonymously, like sometimes is what people need. Don't allow yourself to sink to be destroyed by this. Not at all. We have to keep going. We have to keep going. We have, through the bad days, through the good days. I have a lot more good days now than bad days, and that's like a miracle to me. And so, but you know what? It won't happen if you don't stick around. I never thought it would happen for me, but I stuck it out. And 2 of my brothers killed themselves. They didn't stick it out. Make sure you stick it out and get some help, right? Make sure, whatever it is, whatever kind of help it is, but just make sure you reach out. I have all kinds of information if you need some. And also, there's adult survivor groups out there where you can remain anonymous and you can join anonymously and people don't have to know your name. And you can go on, you can get some help without them really knowing who you are, and this way you can stay safe and, make sure that you do reach out, right, and get some help, right? So take good care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you later tonight. Bye-bye.